In this section, we are going to deploy Python, Node.js, and .NET apps Amazon Elastic Beanstalk. Let's have a quick introduction to this section. In this video, we are going to launch a Python app environment on Elastic Beanstalk. So what exactly are we going to deploy? We are going to deploy a Python Flask API application, a Node.js API, and an ASP.NET API. So you might be asking, why did I choose those particular applications to be deployed on Elastic Beanstalk? Well, because they represent different deployment methods. For example, Python Flask is going to use a tool that we are going to work with, which is called Aws Eb Cli. It's a command line tool that can interact directly with Elastic Beanstalk and provide many useful features and tasks. In the Node.js API example, we are going to use a sample code provided by Elastic Beanstalk to create a skeleton application on which we are going to deploy the actual Node.js application. Finally, in the ASP.NET API, we are going to use Visual Studio 2017 AWS integration tool, which is a graphical user interface tool that is going to directly interact with Elastic Beanstalk to deploy our application. We have already deployed WordPress installation on Elastic Beanstalk, and for that task we used the AWS Management Console. But for this application, we are going to use a different tool. We are going to use a tool that is called Aws Eb Cli. This tool can be installed in one of several ways. If you are on a Linux machine like Ubuntu, for example, you can use your package manager, apt-get. If you are on a Red Hat variant, you can use yum. If you are on a Mac, like this one, you can use brew. And in all cases, you can also use pip install Aws Eb Cli like this. So, once the tool is installed, you will need to ensure that the AWS CLI access or programmatic access credentials are available in your home directory so that you can use the tool to connect to AWS API. So let's start by creating our application directory. I'm going to call it Flask. It is going to be a Python Flask API application, and I'm going to create a single file called application.py. Notice here that the naming is important because when we deploy this application to Elastic Beanstalk, by default, it is expecting a file that is called application.py, and inside it, the module also is going to be called application, as we are going to see in a moment. As you can see, it's a very simple API application. The first line imports the Flask library. We are going to install it in a moment. And then it declares a variable that is called application, and this is important. You will have to name your application variable application because Elastic Beanstalk is expecting a variable with that name. Then you call the application.route and you give it the root. All what this application is going to do is that it is going to return, hey, it's Python Flask application, as a response whenever somebody visits the root of the application. Then it is going to run on all interfaces indicated by host equals 0.0.0.0. It's a very simple web application. And in order to run it, of course, the first thing you're going to need is Flask. So let's install Flask quickly. And if you want to, you can also use the virtual environment provided by Python if you have that installed. So you can use a command like virtualenv flask app, for example. Then using the source command, we are going to activate the environment like this. And now anything that we run inside this environment is specific to this environment. The benefit, of course, of using virtual environment is that you are not going to break anything of your operating system Python installation or your standard Python version or whatever libraries you have installed. Everything is going to be contained inside this environment. Okay, so let's install Flask. So let's install Flask inside this environment by running pip install flask like this. Okay. And you can now test the application by just running Python application.py. If everything is set right, you're going to see a message like this, and your API is going to be listening on port 5000. If I open a new tab in my browser and go to localhost on my system, I should see, hey, it's Python Flask application. So now that we are confident that our application works, let's use another handy command to inform Elastic Beanstalk about our requirements. So I'm going to type pip freeze inside the environment. Pip freeze is going to give me all the packages that this environment needs to function correctly, including, of course, Flask and any dependencies. So with this information at my disposal, I can just create a file that is called requirements.txt, and I'm going to paste everything in the output of this command to requirements.txt, just like that. Now if you have a look, as you can see, I have all the packages with their specific versions that are needed by this environment to function correctly. Again, Elastic Beanstalk is also expecting you to have a requirements.txt file inside your deployment directory.